Hello everybody, welcome to the Great Outdoors. Today we're doing episode 2 of Campfire Stories. Happy Halloween. If you're a fan of the supernatural and strange occurrences that happen in this world, then you're probably familiar with Coast to Coast AM, the radio show. Coast to Coast AM by Art Bell rose to fame in the 90s because of its unexplainable and crazy interviews, along with its extremely compelling supernatural stories. This show often took place late at night and allowed the listeners to call in and share their stories, while also interviewing a large range of people like UFO witnesses, conspiracy theorists, scientists, and experiencers of the supernatural. This story that we're talking about today is not going to be the last Coast to Coast story that I'm going to talk about in this series, but it is the first one and honestly the most captivating in my opinion. This story started with a single phone call to Art Bell one night on his radio podcast and ended up transforming into a series of 5 phone calls over the span of 1997 to 2002. I did everybody a favor and I listened to all 5 phone calls in their entirety, spanning over 5 hours of audio footage. And in this video, I'm gonna relay the entire timeline of what happened in every single phone call. In this story, a man calls Art Bell and he claims that he found a bottomless pit in his property. They call this story Mel's Hole. And what was shared in these phone calls became one of the most chilling mysteries ever shared on Coast to Coast AM. Sit back, relax, because this is a story of Mel's Hole. So the origin of the story: on February 21st of 1997, a man named Mel Waters called into Coast to Coast AM to share a story. This man, Mel Waters, starts by giving us the information that this property where this bottomless pit is on, he's only had it for 4 years. Like said in the intro, Mel claimed that he found a very, very deep hole on his property. And this property is in Ellensburg, Washington, a place where a lot of weird stuff usually happens that we'll talk about later. Mel says that this hole has been around since anybody in the town can remember, and neighbors and people in the city have been throwing their trash down the hole for years upon years. He estimated the hole to be about 9 feet in diameter and says that it has a stone retaining wall around the hole that goes down about 15 feet before going back into regular soil. This already sounds like a normal ass hole, like everybody has seen a 9-foot wide hole before. But what's really peculiar about this hole in specific is that it seems to be never ending. And Mel noticed this because after years and years of people throwing trash, departed animals, refrigerators, everything into this hole, it never started to fill up, or you could never hear it hit the ground. So Mel is an experienced fisherman, and he details in this call about how he's been using fishing line in order to try to determine the depth of this hole. He had been tying a 1-pound weight to the end of his fishing line and dropping it into the hole to see if it would hit bottom. And if you've ever gone fishing before, you know that if the line hits the bottom, the spool will no longer continue to spin. It will stop, so you will know if it hits bottom. Despite using all the line he had at the time, he still never hit the bottom with this 1-pound weight. So that doesn't sound too weird. You know, maybe he only had a couple yards of line or just a regular fishing rod. But no, we learn in this call that Mel is actually buying industrial bulk sizes of fishing line, and he's thrown in about 80,000 feet of line into this hole, still without reaching bottom. To kind of put this into perspective for everybody, I'm sure all of y'all have heard about the deepest known hole right now, the Mariana Trench, which is located in the Western Pacific Ocean and is about 36,000 feet deep. This means that this hole in Mel's yard is over double the deepest hole that we know of right now. So during this first call that Mel makes, we get to hear some interesting information about the hole and some interesting properties that happen surrounding it. Well, first of all, we already know that no matter what you drop into the hole, it could be a giant fridge to a coin, you will never hear that thing hit the bottom, or any kind of sound for that fact. He tells Art that even yelling into the hole, you will not get an echo back. Mel also noted that animals act really strangely around the hole. He said that animals won't even approach the hole or get near it, and if they're forced near the hole, then they will get very aggressive. Along with this, birds would also occasionally circle around the hole. The strangest claim that Mel makes during this first call is actually a story that he relays to Art that he's heard around town. A local told him a story about a hunter in the town that threw his departed hunting partner, which was a dog, down into the hole to dispose of it. Now, however sad that is, the story goes that people would see the exact same dog, collar and all, walking around the town, walking around the woods while they're hunting. People believe that the dog was resurrected by the hole. Along with all this strange information surrounding animals that have to do with the hole, Mel also informed the viewers of some really inexplicable things that would happen when you drop different objects into the hole. When lowered into the hole, some objects would change physical properties. For example, ice will come back being a completely different thing, and we'll get more into that later. That's about the extent of call number 1. But a few days later, Mel calls Art back. This all started when Mel sent Art a letter just explaining how much has happened since his appearance on Coast to Coast. And he starts this call off saying that he's gonna try to relay all of this information as rationally as he can. A few days later, after his first call on Coast to Coast, Mel decides that he wants to go buy some groceries at the local Costco the next town over. When he tries to return home after getting these groceries, he found that the access road to his property had been completely blocked off by armed military personnel. When he asked the military personnel why are they here, he was told that a plane had crashed on his property and that they need to handle it. This is despite Mel saying there was no smoke or debris visible in any way. When he explained this to the armed military guarding his access road on his property, he was met with the response that this property that he thinks is his may not as easily be his, and with the threat that a drug lab can easily be found on this premises, which is a clear warning to get the hell away and do not come anywhere near your property right now. So this is an important detail. This is because Mel had been cultivating plant medicine from northern Nevada on this property. Because of this, there was a research laboratory present on the farm. But it's important to consider that these plants, Mel says, were not illegal and were not narcotics in any way. Meaning that this threat was most likely to kind of plant some kind of evidence to get him to get away from his property. So Mel moves on with his day and he leaves his farm. He goes on to talk to one of his neighbors who tells him some pretty creepy information about the hole. This neighbor says that he had witnessed multiple times a black beam shooting into the sky from the hole. In the coming days, Mel witnesses a vast amount of helicopter activity around his property. Clearly, there's something mysterious going on with this hole, and some people don't want him near it, or the public in general. A little bit later on, Mel's real estate agent actually contacts him and informs him on a very generous offer to buy his property, which at this point in the timeline of all the phone calls, he has not responded to yet. But it's obvious that somebody with a lot of power wanted to get their hands on this hole. Since Mel couldn't do his own hands-on research with the hole anymore, he decided to go around and ask a lot of his neighbors and the locals of the city about what's going on with it. First, Mel talks about how he went and spoke with one of his elderly neighbors who had been around the city for a long time and had been familiar with the hole for far longer than Mel has. This man tells Mel that there used to be a series of stone columns surrounding the hole, and he actually sketched out a picture of what the hole looked like with the columns around it. Mel instantly thought of Stonehenge, you know, stone columns, so he pulled up a picture of Stonehenge for this guy to look at. And when the guy sees it, he exclaims that this is exactly what the hole used to look like. He says that the stones around the hole look just like that, just without the perpendicular stones on top of a lot of the other stones in Stonehenge. The theories about the hole that have been brought up by people calling in so far are honestly a bit out of my wheelhouse as far as my knowledge on physics goes, but one caller did suggest that something to do with the natural copper deposits in the area could have created some kind of interdimensional time portal or something, or some kind of like time travel for any object that was getting dropped down the hole. So that's pretty fun to think about, but that's about the extent of all the information that Mel gives us in this call. Moving on to call number 3. Before I begin the part of the story of the last 3 calls, I feel like it might be important to mention that there is a lot of speculation from various listeners that the caller who claims to be Mel from here on out may not actually be him. So obviously there's no way for me to prove this, but people are often suggesting in comments that this is not the real Mel because it does not sound like the real Mel.
Lined up, and just like that. He said it wasn't, it didn't have that thing on the top, it had some.
You at that distance, you can actually move.
A lot of people think that it might just be somebody who's trained to replicate Mel's voice. I'm not saying that's true, but it's just an interesting fact to kind of keep in mind from here on out. So now it's been quite some time since the last call, and Art Bell finally gets another call from Mel Waters. To be honest, this call is lacking a little bit in new information, And at least the first half of this call is kind of serving the role as a recap of the last two calls and what we know about the hole already. This is because it's actually been years since Mel was last on Coast to Coast. One piece of new information that we do learn is that Mel had been utilizing an old fisherman's trick by using the Lifesavers candy on the end of the line along with the weight. This is an old trick that shark fishermen used to use to get their bait further into the ocean, further than they can actually cast it. Apparently the Lifesaver candy would allow the line to float on and on into the ocean until they would eventually melt, allowing the bait to sink down. This aspect of the Lifesavers melting is exactly why Mel wanted to utilize this for the hole. You see, obviously nobody has any idea what's at the bottom of this hole, and he wants to find out if there's water in the hole. But sure enough, every time that Mel reeled back his line, he would find the Lifesavers completely unmelted, showing that there was no water at the bottom of this hole, or at least he couldn't reach the water. Another peculiar piece of information that's revealed in this call is the mysterious nature of the entire area that Mel Water resides in. In somewhat close proximity to the hole, there have been quite a few other supernatural phenomena that have taken place. Some of these include a jawbone of a whale growing outside of a tree trunk. Dr. Reed's encounter with an alien, which might be covered later on, also took place in close proximity to this town that Mel Waters resides in. Also, the Kennewick Man, which is the remains of a Native American man that are considered to be the oldest and one of the most complete skeletons from the time period of about 8,500 years ago, was found not far from Mel's property. During this call, we do get to learn more about the offer that Mel got that he couldn't refuse. He tells Art that they came to a deal involving him departing and going to Australia, which was something that Mel wanted to do anyway to continue his research on high desert medicinal plants. In this deal that was made, Mel would be getting $250,000 a month in order to permanently lease his land. And since he did not refuse this offer, the buyers were very, very sure that he was actually leaving the country. They actually personally transported him, according to Mel, all the way to the airport with all of his luggage and belongings. Mel does go on to explain that he brought some of the plant life from around the hole and that they had mysterious and amazing medicinal qualities, which he believed is completely due to the hole. Obviously, with this deal that Mel took, you would think that he would never have to work another day in his life. This was not the case, however. Mel eventually arrived back into the United States and he immediately contacted Art Bell. This story of Mel's hole had already become a huge phenomenon, so Art scheduled him to come back onto the show. But unfortunately, Mel was a no-show. But just days after he was supposed to be on the call, he does detail everything that he can remember from that day that he was supposed to be on the air on Coast to Coast AM. So Mel had to start that day off by helping his son move to a different city, Olympia. After helping his son move, he had to return the moving truck and then take the public bus back to his city. Mel remembers from this bus ride that there was some sort of altercation involving him. And this altercation led strange men to approach him after he got off of the bus. These strange men wanted to know about the altercation that happened on the bus. The last thing that he remembers from this day is these strange men telling them that they have a public transportation bus ready for him to go back to Olympia. After that, everything goes dark for him. 12 days later, Mel mysteriously finds himself waking up in a shady part of San Francisco in the streets, with homeless people trying to wake him up and apparently make him sing a song. And Mel has no memory at all of those 12 days that passed while he was knocked out or in some kind of induced coma. He woke up with the exact same clothes he was wearing 12 days ago, no ID, no keys, and he says that he can see on his arm there was still tape residue from apparently some kind of IV being put inside his arm. Along with this, Mel's teeth were stolen. He has no more back molars, and he tells Art that his mouth is still very sore and he tastes blood still. So after waking up, he was eventually able to get back to his son, and this is where he is now at the time of this third call. Mel comes back to find that there has been legal action taken against him. And this legal action is apparently regarding his ex-wife and also the property with the hole. So part of the settlement of his divorce was that he would get the land with the hole on it because his ex-wife did not see the land as valuable. So the basis of this legal pursuit had to do with what the people that took over his land were doing while he was gone. Apparently there was some sort of leasing agreement where Mel was not allowed to install any kind of infrastructure like roads, septic tanks, paving, etc. But Mel speculates and says that she has no access to the area because obviously nobody does. So how would she know about any of this being installed on the property? He thinks that somebody got to his ex-wife and is pushing her to pursue him in a legal way. This is all in an attempt, allegedly, to take down Mel and keep him from sharing his story. We learn in the next call that a lot of this money that he was getting from this buyer had been sank into the legal fees, along with being donated to various charities and paying employees for his research on plant medicine. So that's all for the third call. We're gonna get into the fourth call now, the second to last call. So like the previous call, he starts off by detailing the entire story to this point. And we now know the time frame that Mel was in Australia getting paid $250,000 a month by these people. Mel was in Australia from March of 1997 to just before December of 1999. This phone call is where we start to see Mel get increasingly more outlandish and ecstatic, obviously compared to the previous calls. Well, I will warn everybody, it gets pretty conspiratorial, and it might be better to take a lot of these next things with a grain of salt, but we're gonna talk about them anyway. One of the items that was stolen from Mel while he was unconscious was a self-made belt buckle. This belt buckle contained an impossible coin that he found on the property while digging holes for his plant cultivation. This coin is a 1943 dime with Roosevelt's face on it. And he ties this back to the mysteriousness of the hole because there's no reason that this coin should exist. They were supposed to be printed after Roosevelt's death. Mel claims, however, that Roosevelt was still alive in 1943. I probably should have fact-checked that before I started recording, but if it's true, I'm gonna put it on screen, or if it's false, it'll be right here. Because sorry guys, I don't actually know when Franklin Roosevelt died. Mel also brings up the strange fact that he has no idea where his ex-wife is. He hasn't been able to find any information on her at this point, and maybe she's under a fake name, we don't know. Mel brings up that images of his property have been completely expunged from satellite imagery records. And he says that when you zoom in on his property in these records, all you're gonna see is whited out blotches. Honestly, this is where stuff gets really weird if you don't think it's weird already. So Mel is telling Art that he got in contact with a Native American tribe in Nevada through email, and that they invited him onto their land so that he could investigate a similar hole on their property. From now on, we're gonna be referring to this hole as the second hole. So this area where the second hole is located is super remote and completely untouched land. It's mostly used by these Native Americans to farm and have sheep graze. It has no roads leading into it, and there's no telephone poles, any kind of infrastructure. So the second hole is also 9 feet in diameter, just like the first hole. But instead, it sports a round metal collar that extends about 2 feet into the surface. Mel says that this hole has been on these people's land since before they were even there, and that they made it to this land before the 1800s. This mysterious metal is extending as far down into the hole that you can see and is lining the entirety of the hole. And we can assume even that it goes down further than we can see. This metal lining is not like any other kind of metal. When it's contacted by anything, it does not make any kind of clang or ringing noise. It makes no noises at all. There's no echoes, just like the first hole. And it radiates this kind of heat that makes it warm, but it's not hot to the touch. He says that this second hole is also some kind of spiritual site for the people that live on the land. Another important note is the mysterious plant life that surrounds the area of this hole. It's very similar to the first hole with its extraordinary plant life that have weird medicinal properties. And the native people are aware of this, and they actually collect the plants occasionally. The second hole also repels animals, and they're too scared to get anywhere near it. And the black beam phenomenon is also consistent with this second hole. And this is all according to the Native American people that live on this land. Despite this hole radiating heat, when Mel dropped an ice bucket 1,500 feet into the hole, the ice actually did not melt, and it seemed to completely change the physical properties of the ice. So it made the ice completely not cold to the touch, and now the ice was able to be burned. He said that he knows somebody who had been using this ice as some kind of infinite fuel source or something for his campfire oven, which is just, I don't know about that, but here's an extreme trigger warning right now. If you don't like hearing about animals getting hurt, please mute the video. So as well as lowering ice down into the hole, Mel and this crew of people that he's with also decided that they wanted to lower a living sheep. They decided, and very shamefully by Mel, to lower this sheep inside of a cage 1,500 feet down into the hole. Now, one thing that I've been leaving out until this point is that there have been multiple people, including Mel upon death, that have volunteered to be dropped down into the hole. But after listening to what happened next, you could see why Mel has completely backed out of this statement and does not want to be lowered into the hole when he dies anymore. As they start to move the sheep towards the hole, it is obviously freaking out and does not want to do anything with the hole like all other animals up to this point. They decide that they need to stun the sheep, I guess by hitting it between the eyes. And after they stun the sheep and they start bringing it to the hole, it starts making these terrible ear-piercing noises. They take the sheep as it's making these piercing screams and start to ready it to be dropped into the hole. As they get the sheep to the middle of the hole ready to be dropped down, all noise stops. Apparently, this sheep is still moving inside of the box, but you can't hear anything. And this is immediately after they get it in position in the middle of the hole. About 750 feet down, or halfway to the 1,500 feet max that they have, they do not feel any more movement from the sheep. And when they eventually reach the 1,500 foot mark, the metal collar at the top of the hole begins to ring and vibrate. So they're finished with their experiment and they start to bring the sheep in the box back up to the surface. And when they get it up, they say that there's nothing abnormal about the box itself. And I'm sure you can guess of the state of the sheep, but the sheep itself does look identical to when they dropped it down into the hole. They decide that they need to do an autopsy on the sheep to see what's happening on the inside. Mel says that when they cut into the sheep, it appears to be completely cooked on the inside, but the internal organs and all of the inside of the sheep appear to be completely engulfed by some sort of weird tumor thing. When this growth is removed from the sheep, it is visibly pulsating and kind of moving. And Mel next shares, reluctantly, some really weird information. Mel explains that when they decided to dissect this growth, they found inside, according to Mel, a fetus that looked like a seal with human eyes. And for 2 hours, Mel and this team of people are observing this live, unexplainable fetus. And this fetus alien thing appears to be staring back at them and intelligently observing them. So after a while of this exchanging of observations, this weird seal creature allegedly just slithers back into the hole. But this is not before acknowledging Mel and his people by giving them a little nod. So after this experience, Mel says that he went on to hang out and spend some time with these native people for a little bit. And he ended up relaying his experience to one of the oldest people that are living around this area, who he says completely believes his story without a doubt and is not surprised whatsoever. So that's all of call number 4. In my opinion, guys, call number 5 isn't really that important to the story of Mel's Hole. This is because it happens years later again and is just kind of recapping the entire story. And this is the call where people really start to think that it is just somebody probably prank calling for attention and it's not actually the real Mel. Mainly because they go on to add just some more even unexplainable aspects to the story. So that's concluding the story of Mel's Hole. And guys, please remember that I'm not presenting any of this as fact. This story is wildly outlandish and has been widely speculated to be mostly fake. At the very least, the majority of the listeners believe that calls 3 through 5 are not the real Mel, and maybe it's some sort of early internet prankster trying to get attention. To be fair, it is possible that Mel's voice did change over the years, but to be completely honest with everybody, it's a little hard to believe, being that Mel was in his late 60s throughout the entirety of this story. No matter the reliability of Mel's story, it is one of the most supernatural and captivating tellings of any obscure topic that I have personally heard. And it is considered one of the most legendary coast-to-coast AM calls. For those reasons, I think it's worth talking about for, at the very least, entertainment purposes. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. This took a lot of research. Shout out to Coast to Coast AM and Art Bell. I love that show, and my parents used to show me a lot of different things from it when I was a kid. And I can't help but think that it plays a part in what I find so interesting about the supernatural and mystery of this world. So please, guys, speculate in the comments if you find any of this real or if you think it's all fake. And let me know what you think about the video. Leaving a like would greatly help me out in this series and help me put out more content. And I want to continue doing this. It's fun. So if you like the video, please subscribe. Happy Halloween, everybody.